Hi everyone, I'm Kristen. Welcome and welcome back. Today I'm going to be ranking every single book that I have read so far in the first 3 months of this year. I did not end up doing a monthly wrap-up for each month, mostly because in January I didn't read that many books. I didn't think it was worth it. I was going to do this, I planned to do this like quarterly wrap-up, and then I read a ton of books. and I just never did. So here we are. I'm going to share a few statistics, just like the very small handful of things that I'm recording this year, keeping track of this year. And on top of that, then I'm going to rank every book with some like small little intro or keyword kind of type information about the book from least favorite to favorite. So let's get into the stats. Overall, I read 20 books in the first 3 months of this year. I'm okay with that number. I generally really don't care about numbers. You guys know. But that does include a particular book that I mentioned in my last video that I was going to count in April no matter when I finished it, and I changed my mind because I don't want to wait to talk about it until the end of April. I did finish it on the 31st of March, so I included it in my March totals. And here we are. I'm a liar. That's fine. Priorities. So I made a priority video, you can check it out, of 24 books that I plan to read or that I would really like to prioritize this year. And so far I'm doing really well at keeping on top of that. I have to read at least 2 a month, and I am 1 ahead. I have read 7 of my priority reads so far this year. I've also coincidentally read 7 new to me authors, not the same books at all, just I happen to have read 7 authors of which I am reading their books for the first time. New releases is a little bit low. I've actually only read 4 new releases in the first quarter of the year. I would like to read more new releases, and there's a ton of new releases that came out so far this year that I haven't been able to read yet. And it's really just because my library has not been purchasing the new releases that I am interested in. Okay, somebody woke up, so I've tried to film this like 3 times now. We're just gonna go with it. There might be some noises. We'll see if we can get through it. So, new releases. My library has not been purchasing or like getting copies of the new releases that I'm interested in, and on top of that, the ones that they haven't been uploading them on the day of release in their regular pattern. Usually it's the day of release at a particular time, and they haven't been doing that this year. And so I don't have the time and mental capacity to like keep checking back at the library like consistently after the release date. So sometimes I'll go, like for example, a book just came out. I maybe went on 3 days after, and I'm like 20 weeks on hold for that particular book. Now that is a huge release, so other ones aren't quite as significant, but again, mostly they're just not purchasing them, and that's unfortunate. Something in the water with number 7 so far this year, because I've also started 7 new series. I have only finished 2 series, but I have read 8 sequels. So overall, I'm like feeling pretty good about continuing on, like working towards existing series that I already have on the go. Yeah, so far so good. So those are the only stats of the things that I'm recording. Let's get into the books themselves. Numbers 20 through 16 are the first 4 books in the Bromance Book Club. Why did I read all 4 if they're the lowest 4 books that I read? I don't know. I had heard that the hockey one was good, or I thought I had heard the hockey one was good. He's a particular character who exists in all the other books. This is a series that follows a group of men who have a book club where they read romance books to try to better understand and communicate with the women in their lives, particularly to improve the relationships that they have. The first one is a second chance at love. It's like fixing a failing marriage. The second one is a hate to love. The third one is friends to lovers. And the fourth one is a marriage of convenience, and that was the hockey player one. So I kind of like held out. I enjoyed the first one. I thought it was like something new and different and unique. It didn't fix or didn't address all of the problems in the marriage that it brought up. So that was a bit of a minor note, but like overall I enjoyed the fun concept. And then it just really went downhill from there, and I kept trying to hold out for the hockey players book, and I did not end up liking it. So that was unfortunate. I really just like didn't like or cared nothing about books 2 through 4. Coming in hot at number 16 was House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. I have never been so disappointed for where a series went after a first book. I felt like after the first book that it was her attempt at saying like, look, I'm not a one-trick pony. I can do other things. And I bought that. I really enjoyed that first book in House of... I don't remember. The first book in Crescent series. Crescent City series, and from there it became exactly every other thing that she has ever written, and I found that really disappointing. I pretty much read the last 30% of that book. I'm certain that there's going to be spin-offs within this world with some particular side characters, because why else were certain plots or POVs in there, and I absolutely am certain that I'm not going to be reading them. The keywords that I wrote down for that one are off the rails, crossover episode, and hey read. Top 15 now. Coming in at 15, we have Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail, and this is the second book in the Bright Falls romance series, which is a series of sapphic romances. No, play with your toys. I'm going to talk about the second one, or the first one, sorry, as well. Obviously, that is coming up if I read book number 2. Overall, I really liked this one. I just didn't like it quite as much as the first book. I have actually struggled with contemporary sapphic romances in that I have not really found any that have been particularly successful for me. And so I have absolutely really enjoyed, like thoroughly enjoyed these first 2, and I'm still on hold for the third book. Book number 14 is Book number 14 is Age of Assassins. This was a little bit disappointing for me for where it ranked. I don't think I'm going to continue on the series. This was one of my priority reads. It was a priority TBR vet, and it follows an assassin and it follows an assassin who is sort of in training. And I had heard that it was really good for the mentor-mentee relationship. He has a female mentor, and that's something a little bit new as well. Also, it has some disability rep, as our main character, Gerton, has a club foot. And the whole setup here is that they have been hired not to assassinate someone, but to prevent an assassination, because how better to catch an assassin than to use an assassin? That's the whole gimmick. Overall, I think the mentor-mentee relationship was not as significant. It was a very significant relationship, and we didn't get as much time or energy on exploring that dynamic that I would have preferred. If you were to tell me that the next 2 books focus on that relationship a lot more, I would consider continuing on reading them. Otherwise, I was just a little bit disappointed in Gerton. I just felt like he was doing a really crappy job, and got sucked into the pretend life that he was as this sort of spy, the role that he was playing. So yeah, didn't totally work for me. Could be convinced to keep reading. Book number 13, this is Delilah Green Doesn't Care, the first book in the Bright Falls series that I mentioned already. I wrote down sapphic romance, childhood trauma, secret love affair. It did remind me a little bit of a Cinderella retelling, not in the components of Cinderella's story, but in the evil stepmother kind of a thing, where it definitely had a very traumatic stepmother situation. Our main character lost both of her parents really young and was brought up, provided for financially is probably the most you can say really about that relationship, by her stepmother. And she also has a stepsister, and that's what is the setup here, is that she's coming back to be the wedding photographer for her stepsister. And she winds up having vibes with the stepsisters, one of the stepsisters' best friends and bridesmaids. And it's secret, because the stepsister and our main character Delilah have a taut relationship. As I said, really enjoyed it, liked it more so even than Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail. I really enjoyed that first book, and I'm planning to continue on in the series. And would read other books by this author, for sure. Then we have, at number 12, The Untold Story, and that is the series conclusion to the Invisible Library series that I was reading all of last year. I read 7 of the 8 books last year in 2023, and finally finished the 8th and final book in January of this year. The fact that it is coming in at number 12 just goes to show you how many great books I read that are in the top 10 this year, because I think it was a really solid conclusion to the series. I really enjoyed it. I loved that series overall. I did talk about it a lot in my end of the year content last year, so I won't say too much else about it other than to say that I think book 6 was my favorite book in the series overall. If you want me to do a should you read the Invisible Library series, let me know down below. I definitely could be convinced to do something like that for sure. And the last one in the bottom 10 here is The Vampires of El Norte. I do wish that I had done a January wrap-up just so I could have talked about this book closer to the date, or I should have done a review at the time. I'm gonna have to film this in 2 parts. How to describe it? Historical, paranormal, that has real mythical folklore kind of vampires in it, and we are set on the Mexico-Texas border back in, I don't remember the date, so maybe I'll pop it up in the corner here for you. Our main characters are both Mexican, and we are facing, or they're reunited after decades apart with the backdrop of a potential invasion of Texans across the border. And it's a second chance at love. I absolutely loved our love interest Nestor. I had more struggle with our female lead. I thoroughly enjoyed the reading experience of that book. As I said, it was very swoony, especially with Nestor, but I do actually have a lot of like nitpicky things about it, so it was not by any means perfect. I could actually spend a lot of time like nitpicking on, as I said, like some of the forced proximity choices, their character choices. There was some stuff with the vampires that either I totally misread a certain scene, or she just like decided to take it in a different route and didn't realize that she had tried to explain it one way and then went back on another way. It's more likely that I misread it. But anyway, I could nitpick a lot, but I won't. And overall, I just really enjoyed the experience of reading it. Okay, top 10, Chaos Ensues here. Coming in at book number 10 is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. This is book number 2 in the Emily Wilde's series. This is, of course, following our scholarly main character. It is like a historical alternate history fantasy sort of thing where fae and fairies are real, and our main character is a scholar who studies the fae and folklore. The first book, we were following her in a particular small village location with, she's kind of curmudgeonly, she is more of a curmudgeonly, I suddenly can't remember how to say this word, curmudgeonly? I'm gonna stop. She's more of the grumpy, and she has a colleague, Wendell Battleby, who is much more sunshine character, and the two of them just have really fun dynamic in the first book, and I enjoyed how that dynamic was continued to be explored in the second book. I really appreciated that they stuck to the main character's like true nature in a lot of it. Like, it stuck true to how she was portrayed and presented in the first book, despite that it continued to explore how the relationship developed. So you could still see that she's still herself while also exploring sort of this different component to the relationship. But yeah, I thought the addition of the niece was absolutely hilarious and was definitely part of how they kept Emily true to character. Overall, I think I actually enjoyed it a little bit more than book number 1. But I read it a really long time ago, so I could be misremembering. Book number 9, The Book That Wouldn't Burn. I finally got a chance to read this. I tried reading it last year when I was like 9 months pregnant, and I was reading the ebook and reading it before bed, and it was just not a success in that format for me. In that state, I was extremely tired and fell asleep every night after like 3 pages. So I decided to listen to the audiobook this time. I did re-listen to what I had already read super quick just to get through, and then from then on, I think I just like binged the rest of the book, listening to it as often as I could. I really enjoyed it. But this, I think, is an example of a book that it's better to know, oh my god, it's better to know less about the book going into it. Hi! It's better to know less about the book going into it in order for a more impactful reading experience, but we're dealing with a library, we're dealing with like alternate spaces and times and location with star-crossed love. Oh my god. This is chaos. What are the other keywords that I wrote down here? Libraries, linked fates, linked fates, funky timelines, and labyrinth. And we have 2 main characters, one of whom is living in the library, and the other whom leaves a poor original setting and becomes an apprentice at this library, but is it the same library? It's very clear that there's something going on with the library, and our 2 main characters sort of weave in and out of each other's lives, and I don't want to say anything more than that. I really enjoyed the last, like the conclusion, the discussion that was had there towards the end about how 2 different peoples can view each other just while using, and disagree, but while using... Did you just wake up? Go back to sleep. Shh. While using very similar language. How far can I get without having to stop and refilm this? Okay, book number 8 was Bride by Ali Hazelwood. What can I say? I had fun. I really enjoyed it. This is Ali Hazelwood's foray into paranormal romance. It is a vampire marrying a werewolf for political reasons, despite all past attempts at this relationship ending in bloodshed. There's werewolves, so of course there's like some mate elements. There's definitely of course there's like some mate elements. There's definitely some very similar personality types to Ali Hazelwood's other books, both with her female and male leads. It's not dual perspective. It's single perspective from the female POV, but it includes like a little snippet at the beginning of each chapter that gives you a small little insight into what's going on with our male lead. Books number 6 and 7 are Golden Fool and Fool's Fate, books number 2 and 3 in the Tawny Man series. So this is the other series that I concluded this year. Also, Golden Fool was one of my priority continuing reads, or continuing series reads. I have them as books number 6 and 7 because I don't really know what order I would put them in. And this is, of course, in the realm of the Elderlings, the Tawny Man series. It's a little bit far into it, so I can't really say too much about the plot other than that we're back in Fitz's life, following Fitz, doing Fitzy things. It is still very slice of life. And while the pacing in both of these books was very odd, and really not much happened altogether in these two books, I still was completely engrossed while reading them. And as I said, not much really happens totally between those two books, and with all of the amount of pages that is dedicated to what's going on. Very slice of life, but I just love being in Fitz's head, even though I do think his mood and outlook on life sometimes rubs off on me. And we have made it to the top 5. Is it better to stop now and come back later, or to keep pushing through? I have made it to the top 5, as I said, a couple other times while attempting to film this. Okay, let's just do it. Coming in at number 5, we have 12 Kings in Sherikai. This is one of my priority reads for the year. This was a priority series start. I think it's the Shattered Sands series, if I'm remembering correctly. And I absolutely loved this book. It is desert fantasy. What are the other keywords that I wrote down here? Desert fantasy, hint of love, secrets, revenge, and conspiracy. It's also like a history is written by the victors kind of a story, and we are following a main character whose mother was killed by these 12 kings, who are immortal beings within this walled desert city. Our main character is out in the city on a night when she isn't supposed to be, and she witnesses something that gets her questioning things and following down a path of exploration. There's some gladiator elements as well. As I said, the hint of love is there, which, if it's going to be like a really strong fantasy focus, I actually do enjoy like just a very small little hint of love. I think we're going to have to call it here for this filming. Hopefully I'm able to get back, hopefully today, hopefully same clothes, we'll see. So stay briefly tuned. For you, it'll just be a blink in time. For me, who knows, but I will see you for the top 4 in just a moment. And I'm back, same day and everything. So now we have to get into the top 4 books from the first 3 months of the year. So these ones I obviously really enjoyed. Possible new favorites? Yes. So coming in at number 4 is A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen. Definitely some critiques possible for this one, but I do really struggle with fantasy romance that keeps me both engrossed, satisfied, entertained from the romance and fantasy plot perspective, and this one I think hit both on the head, at least, if not perfectly. I had a really good time. This is a Norse and like very obviously Viking inspired fantasy. In this world, it's possible to be god touched, where essentially one of the gods might donate like a drop of their blood in your conception. They may or may not be involved in your conception, but they might donate a drop of their blood to your conception, in which case it bestows upon you some of their powers. This one does have a classic I've had secret powers hidden all along kind of a setup, where our main character is one of these god-touched peoples, but it turns out there's a reason why that information has been hidden this whole time, and we explore that. Very instantaneous banter, sexual tension between the two. I actually did really enjoy the banter. It was very sexually charged, a lot of it, but overall I liked like the witty, quick banter that they kind of immediately seemed to have, and I appreciated that they at least like it wasn't just attraction, even though like obviously they were attracted to each other, but they did seem to like really get off on that back and forth chatter, and yeah, just interacting with each other, which I really appreciated. So chalk this one up for a romance or fantasy romance that works for me. Thank you, Danielle L. Jensen. Something in her, not necessarily her like intimacy scenes, but something in how she writes both romance and like fantasy plot and brings those together really, really works for me. Similar to Vampires of El Norte, while I really enjoyed the reading experience, I also could still be really nitpicky about some things that happened. There were things that like irked me about the main character, about the plot, about like this guy that she works for. There would be some things that were said, I'm like, why is this a thing that we're following? And then it would actually be addressed. Like I think I actually would sometimes like be reading a paragraph, have something that was bugging me, write it down in my notes, go back to the book, keep reading, and then have that exact thing be addressed by someone, if not the main character. So that I did generally appreciate that. But even though there are like, you know, this isn't a review for that. I enjoyed it. Fantasy romance, it worked for me. Number 4 for this year so far. Coming in at number 3, the book that almost wasn't incorporated in this video, that's Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. Oh my gosh, this was so good, you guys. But also, why did nobody tell me how devastatingly sad it is? I don't want to give it away, but I absolutely thoroughly loved and every moment of reading this book. I listened to the audio. It was absolutely fantastic. I do have trouble like hearing like the beauty of writing. I know that this is generally something that's described as being very beautifully written, and I have trouble like focusing on the actual writing from an audiobook, but overall I felt like the experience was really beautiful. What it was exploring was so interesting. I guess like I did feel like it was a beautiful experience listening to the audio book, and I'm very nervous but also excited to continue on and to complete this duology. I think people are not quite as in love with the sequel, if I am understanding correctly, and to be honest, based on the ending of the first one, I don't know how you could be super satisfied with the sequel without saying anything else than that, but absolutely love this experience. And that's again like one that I was going to include it in April no matter when I finished it, because I kind of already had this list written, and then I had to rejig everything in order to fit this in, because I could not wait to tell you guys that I absolutely loved Strange the Dreamer. Oh, and that was another one of my priority reads. I think it was a TBR bet as well. And Fate Inked in Blood was a priority new release. Actually, that's a good note. I think every book in the top 6 was one of my priority reads. That's pretty good. Now, to be fair, there are some priority reads that I started and did not finish. I have to get to my DNFs. I forgot. Okay. Coming in at number 2, Age of Swords, the second book in the Legends of the First Empire by Michael J. Sullivan. Loving the series, absolutely loved it. There were moments where I was like fist pumping while listening to the audio, like so excited at certain moments. It also really gets you in the feels. There are some scenes, like you'll be having like a good time, and then he'll give you a little bit more information about a character, or he'll paint like a picture. There was this devastating scene that was like not a big plot moment, but just like this really small backstory of a minor character that I think is probably going to become more of a main character that just destroyed me. Like, loving this series. It's so character focused for one that actually does have like a good moving, plotting along plot. Cannot wait to pick up Age of War. I'm actually going to be, that's I think the next thing that I'm going to be picking up. I think I could have said more if, you know, I was doing this right after reading it, but alas, here we are, and I don't want to take up more time anyway. Which means that my favorite book so far from the first 3 months of the year is The Curse of Chalian by Lewis McMaster Bujold. Wow, what a book. I can't believe I have not read this before. I cannot believe more people aren't talking about it. It is like very like quiet, subtle, but also like quietly and subtly perfect book in how tight of a narrative it is. Gosh, it's been a really long time since I've read this, so I don't have like a good like spiel set up for the plot here, but basically we're following a previous lord in this kingdom whose land was essentially like lost as part of a border dispute, and he went through some pretty hard times that are explored a little bit after that incident. He's coming back to the kingdom, basically just hoping for like any small little spot in somebody's household. And he gets more than that very simple position. He winds up becoming the secretary to the princess. I know that's not the terms that they use, I don't remember them, but essentially the princess in this realm. And from there we get like a rather character-focused exploration of some like politically shifting landscape within this kingdom, and this particular character's sort of like fight to protect but at the same time like educate the princess in his, who's also like secretary slash like tutor. So he wants to both like protect as well as educate her on the dynamics within the kingdom while flowing through some changing political upheaval that's going on. It was wonderful. It was so wonderful. The only devastating thing about this book was that I thought it was the start of a new series, and I think it like sort of is, but like it works as a standalone, and then I think there's more books in this world, but there are more companions that follow other characters, and that's a little bit upsetting. So at the moment when I finished it, I was like so excited to like jump into book 2, what happens next kind of thing, even though it had like, you know, a pretty conclusive ending, and I found out that in fact it does not really follow the same person in the next book. So that was pretty sad. So if you haven't checked this book out yet, and you tend to agree with me or like generally like books that I like, you should check out this book for sure. It definitely is more politically leaning in like a fitting in and weaving in like political court intrigue kind of, while still being a little bit more character focused. Huge win for me on this one. Absolutely loved it. I am definitely going to continue on reading in this world. I just like have to let go of the idea of continuing on with this particular main character's story. So those are all of the 20 books that I have read and completed in the first 3 months of this year, ranked from least favorite to favorite. I did have a couple DNFs or not for nows. I think this video is already long enough though, so maybe I will leave those for another video and I'll tell you about all the books that did not work for me in the first quarter of this year. How are the first 3 months of 2024 for you reading wise? Are you on track with your goals? I'm feeling pretty good about my priority reads setup and system. At the beginning I wasn't sure because I did put a couple of them down initially, but obviously with the top 6 being all priority reads for me this year, I think it is generally working out for me. I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day. Bye.